Okay, so today we are going to learn about nutrients and why do we need them and the different types of nutrients that we need. So why do we need nutrients? For our body to fully function. So it can grow, it can repair itself, and the main thing is to produce energy. Every cell needs to be constantly producing energy, and we need those nutrients to make that energy. So when we're looking at where does energy come from, the primary source of energy always comes from the sun. Plants then convert that sun into glucose through the process of photosynthesis, which, if you remember, we kind of talked about in grade 9 science, and we'll learn in more detail in grade 12 bio. So the idea is that sunlight, so those photons of sunlight, get converted into glucose through the process of photosynthesis in the leaves of plants. What are the factors that control how much energy you need or glucose? Because that's kind of what we use as our chemical or stored energy. If it's an endothermic species or an exothermic species. Endothermic is a warm-blooded, so you need to maintain a constant temperature, so they're going to require more energy to keep that temperature ideally. Size, larger species is going to need more energy, so they're going to need to consume more nutrients. Your metabolism. Everybody's metabolism is a little bit different, but what actually is metabolism? So metabolism is a set of chemical reactions that occur in every single cell in your body. There's two types of reactions that can happen, catabolism and anabolism. So your catabolism is the breakdown of larger molecules into smaller. So if you're looking, you can see here, so it's where you take those polysaccharides, so your long sugar chains, and your body's going to break them down into single glucose monomers that it can use. Anabolism is going to be the opposite. It's taking small molecules and turning them into larger molecules. So you can see in the picture over here. And it's where you're building up, say, taking those small micromolecules and converting them into larger subunits that the cells can actually use. What affects our metabolism? So your metabolic rate, on how fast you take that glucose and turn it into usable energy. So body size is going to affect metabolic rate. How much physical activity? A person that's more physically active is going to burn food or energy at a faster rate. Gender, males typically that have more muscle mass, so that's going to have a higher metabolic rate. Age, as you get older, your metabolic rate decreases. And then heredity. Some people just have genetics that allow for them to eat whatever they want, and it goes right through them with their metabolism because it's just a very high fast metabolism. So what are nutrients? They are going to be molecules. So you're looking at atoms off the periodic table that kind of work with our body and function many different ways. There's inorganic nutrients and organic nutrients. Inorganic are going to be your water, your phosphates, your ions. Organic are going to be carbon-based compounds. So what that means is that they're going to have a backbone of carbon and hydrogens. They will have side groups sometimes of nitrogen and sulfur or oxygen, but they're just going to be carbon chains. Sometimes they're little circles of carbon atoms as well, but that's the idea of your organic compounds. It's always going to be a base chain of carbons with hydrogens, oxygens, sulfur, and nitrogens all on the side. That will be very important when you get to grade 12 bio and grade 12 chem. Okay, so when we're talking about nutrients, some important things you're going to see are macromolecules. This is the one topic that really carries forward to that grade 12 bio course. So you have the four macromolecules, your carbohydrates, your proteins, your lipids, nucleic acid. We aren't really going to focus on nucleic acid today. We're going to look at carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids more. Macromolecules can be essential nutrients or non-essential nutrients, depending what it is. If it's an essential nutrient, it means that you need to obtain that nutrient from a food source. It means your body cannot make it. Okay, and those macromolecules are essential for life in every single cell. So the very first one we're going to talk about is your carbohydrates. So when you think of carbohydrates, most think of breads and pasta. But and the carbohydrates, that is a carbohydrate. But when you're looking more on a smaller scale, you're looking at the structure. You can see that carbohydrates are an organic compound. They have that carbon hydrogen. So when you're looking at the diagram in the corner, where there's those little corners and nothing, they represent carbons. I don't know if my will allow me to write, but those are little C's there. So those little guys just represent a lot of carbons. Because if you think about it, Carbo means carbons, and then hydrate means water. And if you look at your molecule, you have carbons, oxygen, and hydrogens, and that's what it's made up of. So everything of carbohydrates will have a carbon with hydrogen, with oxygen. The numbers will change. So if you think of glucose, it's C6H12O6. Fructose, galactose, sucrose, they'll have a different composition, but they'll all be similar ratios. Okay? When we're talking about carbohydrates, we talk about monosaccharides, and that's your glucose, disaccharide, and polysaccharide. So when you're looking at, it's just the amount of change. So in the corner, that's going to be your monosaccharide. It's one sugar molecule. Disaccharide means you have two sugar molecules together, and a polysaccharide means you have a very long chain of them. And the whole point of carbohydrates are essential for our energy. That is the basis component of cellular respiration. It also is important in building your cell membranes. Okay, so that they're super important when we start looking at the process of cellular respiration next year. So let's kind of go to those examples of polysaccharides. You have starch, glycogen, and cellulose. Starch is what we get out of plants. It's a long chain. So if you look here, that's what your starch molecule looks like. It's a really long chain of just glucomonomers. Glycogen is just a similar idea with just a different chain structure. They are both digestible. One's a plant sugar and one's animal sugar. Cellulose is different. And if you look at cellulose, it's kind of like sheets on top of each other, so we're unable to digest it. It means our enzymes can't get between the sheets, and so we can't break that down. If an animal is able to digest it, it's usually because they have a specific bacteria in their gut that allows them to break them down. So those are your carbohydrates. We're going to move on to proteins. Proteins, again, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, so that means it's an organic compound. Proteins consist of amino acids. And what amino acids is, they're just like building blocks of life that kind of put together to make a big long protein. And so you'll get this long protein chain that will keep folding and folding and make a larger structure. And that's kind of the idea of the protein. It's a long chain of amino acids. There's 20 different amino acids that exist, and they'll be talked about more in the grade 12 course. So why do we need proteins? They help build and repair muscle in the membrane. They act as a catalyst, and what it means as a catalyst, it's an enzyme. It's able to speed up a reaction. So it makes the reactions out in the body happen faster, and it also is used to fight infections. Okay, to the third macromolecule nutrient is going to be your lipids. Again, it's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, so it's an organic compound. They are very large chains. They are non-polar, so that means that they can't dissolve in water. And if you think about putting oil in water, it doesn't dissolve because oil is an example of a lipid. Same with your butters and your margarine. Okay? How their structure is it's usually a glycerol attached to some fatty acid chain. And in the next slide, we'll kind of show you. They have a lot of energy stored in them, but when you're breaking it down, it's not quite, our body's not as good at it. So our body is better equipped to break down glucose rather than the lipids. So if there's glucose, they'll do that first, which is that carbohydrate, before the lipids. But the lipids do store a lot of energy in them. Our cell membranes are also made up of lipids. So that's why they're super important. There's different types of lipids. You have your steroids and your triglycerides. Steroids can be hormones that your body produces. Steroids are also hormones that people inject, which are unhealthy for you, but there's the difference with them. Triglyceride, so if you're looking, as we talked about it, you have that glycerol molecule and then these long chains of fatty acids. And each of those peaks in the line represent just carbons. It's just not showing you, it's the scientist's way of kind of simplifying a diagram. Then when you get to your triglycerides, there's different types. There's saturated fats and unsaturated fats. One is better for you than the other. So unsaturated is not bad for you because if you look at the diagram, it has that double bond. And so what happens due to that double bond is if you have multiple unsaturated fatty acids, because of that little bend in it, they don't stack nice and neat. They kind of crumple up on each other. So they kind of keep moving because they don't stack. Where for saturated, they will sit nice and neat on top of each other and they will clog your arteries. Because these don't sit, they'll just keep moving through. So we'll kind of go back over the idea. Saturated fats can clog arteries because they can stack. And what it means is they have the maximum number of hydrogen atoms, so they all have the single bonds here. Unsaturated will have double bonds, and so it causes a kink in it, and it prevents the fats from stacking. Okay, vitamins. So they are needed to help in the reactions. They are needed for your immune system, for growth, development. We only need small quantities of vitamins. Some vitamins are good for us, and some vitamins, if you take too much, become bad for us. So it just kind of depends on if it is a fat soluble or water soluble vitamin. And what that means is fat soluble means it actually gets stored in our fat tissues for later use. If you keep building up, that never goes away. So high amounts of it actually become toxic. Where water soluble dissolves in water, and if you take too much, it gets excreted in your urine. So overdosing on, say, vitamin C isn't as big deal if you're taking too much of it because it will go through it. Where taking too much vitamin A, D, E, and K are really bad because they build up in your system. So really make sure that you're reading how much you're supposed to take with that for the person that's taking it. Okay, and the second last one is your minerals. They are now your inorganic compounds. So it means that it's not that carbon-hydrogen backbone. They're again used for chemical reactions, tissue development, growth, immune system. You have your potassium ions that are super important with your nervous system to send out your signals. You have your magnesium, so there's different minerals that are important for your system. And then the last one is water. We are made up of more than 50 to 60% water. All the ions in our body are dissolved in water, so it dissolves a nutrient. It helps flush toxins from the body. It makes your tissues and your joints are moving well, regulates temperature, and then eliminates your waste. So water is kind of essential for life with all of the other nutrients. So having a well-balanced diet of all of the nutrients that we've listed is good for kind of being healthy and everything. All right, so next lesson is going to be moving on to the digestive system. Thanks, class.